Okay, let's unpack this. We're diving into really the definitive guide for something we all deal with constantly, personal finance management. It can feel like a huge, dense topic, right? But we've got this great source, a really comprehensive 25-point Q&A framework that basically lays out the mechanics of managing your money.
Yeah, and our mission today is pretty straightforward. We want to take these, foundational ideas, everything from just basic budgeting to more advanced stuff like growth strategies, and make them really actionable. This deep dive, hopefully, will be your shortcut to feeling, well, informed and actually empowered about your finances.
Right, empowered. So we're diving into managing your money wisely to meet specific financial goals. But maybe before we jump into strategy, we need a clear definition. What exactly is personal finance management, or PFM?
Okay, so at its heart, PFM is really the practice of planning, organizing, directing, and controlling your money, your monetary resources, all to achieve your lifetime goals. And the framework we're using breaks it down into 4 key actions: budgeting, saving, investing, and importantly, responsible spending. It's definitely a cycle, not just a one-and-done fix.
And what's interesting is that this framework doesn't just lump money together. It immediately breaks your financial life down into 5 structural pillars, which makes sense because you can't really manage the whole thing if you don't understand the different parts, right?
That's exactly right. These 5 pillars give you a clear map of your whole financial world. So first up, you've got income. That's the money coming in, what you earn. Second, expenses, obviously, the money going out. Third is savings. That's the cash you're putting aside for short-term stuff and emergencies. Fourth, investments. Now, this is money you're using strategically to try and earn more money over time through assets. And then there's the 5th, absolutely critical pillar, debt management. This is all about handling your loans, your credit responsibly. And the thing is, if just one of these pillars is shaky, the whole structure feels unstable.
Okay, that definitely raises the stakes. I mean, if it's just juggling these 5 things, why should someone listening really commit to mastering PFM now? Why does this deep dive actually matter?
Oh, it matters massively because PFM is fundamentally the key lever for your independence. It's way beyond just having a decent amount in the bank. It's the path to actually controlling your money, which in turn directly reduces financial stress. I mean, think about that background anxiety, maybe living paycheck to paycheck or just worrying about an unexpected bill landing. PFM helps quiet that noise, and more tangibly, it's really the only reliable way to hit those major life goals. Saving for a down payment, funding education for yourself or your kids, or the big one, securing a comfortable retirement. Without a plan, honestly, those goals just stay, dreams.
That urgency definitely brings us straight into the first phase, doesn't it? Gaining control. And the number one tool for control has got to be the budget. Now, budget, that word often feels negative, like it's all about restriction. But this framework really flips that idea.
It does. It frames the budget as an imperative, yeah, but not as punishment. It's more like a preventative strategy. A budget is basically a forward-looking plan. It's your financial roadmap. It stops you from overspending before it even happens. And it makes sure every dollar you earn has a job. Whether that job is for next week or 30 years from now. It shifts you from just reacting to your bank balance to being proactive about it.
Okay, so let's get practical then. How does the framework suggest setting up a simple monthly plan? Something that doesn't feel totally overwhelming. What are the basic steps?
Yeah, simple is key. It starts with clarity. Step 1, just list your total net income after taxes. That's your baseline, the raw material you've got to work with each month.
All right, step 1, net income. Step 2 sounds like where the hard work happens. Write down all your expenses. And you mentioned earlier, there's a crucial distinction here that often gets missed. We need to be really clear about fixed versus variable costs.
Exactly. That distinction is vital. Fixed costs are, the ones that are pretty much the same every month and aren't easily changed quickly. Think rent or mortgage, car payments, insurance premiums. They're kind of non-negotiable in the short term. Variable costs, on the other hand, that's where you have leverage. Groceries, eating out, entertainment, maybe even utilities or gas, they fluctuate based on your choices day to day, week to week. And tracking these variable costs super carefully, that's the absolute key to finding money you didn't even realize you were spending. If you want to, say, cut costs by 10%, you have to know exactly where that variable spending is going. Otherwise, you're just guessing.
Okay, so you've got your income listed. You've painstakingly listed all expenses, separating fixed and variable. What are the last 2 steps in this simple plan?
Right. Step 3 is just the basic math. Income minus expenses. See what's left over or if there's a shortfall. Step 4, And this is really non-negotiable if you want to make progress.
Right.
You save or invest whatever is remaining immediately. People call it paying yourself first. If you wait till the end of the month to see what's left, well, let's be honest, that surplus usually just gets absorbed by random spending. You got to grab it right away.
That idea of immediate allocation, paying yourself first, it sounds simple, but it's tough without structure. For listeners who want something defined, maybe without complicated spreadsheets, the 50-30-20 rule pops up all the time. Let's dig into that. How does that allocation actually work?
Yeah, the 50-30-20 rule is really popular because it simplifies things a lot. It gives you clear buckets. So the biggest chunk, 50% of your net income, is earmarked for needs. These are the absolute essentials for survival and basic living. Housing, minimum debt payments, utilities, basic groceries, essential transport to work. Basically, if you absolutely couldn't live without it, it falls into this 50% needs category.
Okay, half for needs, then there's 30% for wants. This sounds like the fun category.
It is, yeah. This is your quality of life spending. Dining out, streaming subscriptions, holidays, that nice coffee, hobbies, clothes beyond the basics. This 30% bucket gives you permission to enjoy your money, which is important. But it also puts a fence around that spending so it doesn't start eating into your essentials or, crucially, your future savings.
Right, which brings us to the last piece, the critical 20%.
And this, honestly, is the part that determines your long-term financial health. The final 20% must be dedicated to savings and debt repayment. This 20%. It's non-negotiable in the ideal scenario. This is the money you're actively putting towards your future self, building wealth, getting rid of debt faster. Now, if you find that your needs alone are eating up, say, 80% or 90% of your income, the framework is pretty clear. You urgently need to review those fixed costs. Maybe that means looking at a cheaper place to live or finding ways to slash high-interest debt, because without carving out something close to that 20%, real financial growth becomes incredibly difficult.
Okay, but let me push back on that a bit. For someone listening who maybe lives in a really high cost of living area or is on a tighter income, doesn't that 20% sometimes just feel impossible? How does the framework handle that reality?
That's a really important practical question. The 50-30-20 is definitely a target, it's a guideline, not like a strict law you must follow from day one. If today you can realistically only save 5% or 10%, okay, start there. But the mission then becomes track your spending relentlessly, especially those variable costs, those wants, and figure out where you can potentially trim things to free up another few percent next month and the month after. The key is the consistency and the effort to move towards that target. The framework acknowledges financial health as a spectrum, absolutely, but it strongly urges you to treat whatever you can save, aiming for that 20% as a minimum payment to your future. You should always try to negotiate with the 30% wants category before you even think about touching the 20% savings bucket.
Okay, that makes sense. Treat it as the goal, even if you have to build up to it. So once we've managed to carve out that 20% or whatever percentage we can start with, we move into why saving is so important beyond just having cash. What are the real benefits?
The benefits are huge, both practically and psychologically. Practically, savings are what fund your big planned goals, like that house down payment or college tuition or even a big trip. Mentally, though, it creates this massive buffer against stress. It's huge. When you know you have some resources set aside, you can face unexpected things, a job change, a surprise medical bill, with a sense of calm, not panic. It just grants you stability, security, peace of mind, really.
And since we know willpower alone is usually a terrible strategy for saving, what are the best practical ways to actually make it happen, to make saving automatic?
Automate. That's the number one method. Set up an automatic transfer from your checking account to a dedicated savings account. Schedule it for the day you get paid. If the money never really hits your main spending account, you're way less likely to spend it. Out of sight, out of mind, kind of. You also have to be pretty ruthless sometimes in reviewing things like subscriptions you don't use, or finding those little leaks in your variable spending. A few dollars saved here and there consistently can add up surprisingly fast. And crucially, when you do save, make that money work a little for you. Don't just let it sit in a standard checking account earning basically zero interest. Look into high-interest savings accounts, HIAs. The money's still safe, it's still liquid and accessible, but at least it's earning something to help counteract inflation a bit.
Okay, so we're automating savings into hopefully a high-interest account. But within that 20% savings goal, there's one specific type of savings that's non-negotiable first priority: the emergency fund. Let's define exactly what this fund is for. Why is it separate from general savings for, say, a vacation?
Yeah, the emergency fund is different. It's your financial shield, pure and simple. It's money saved only for true, unexpected, unavoidable emergencies. Think losing your job suddenly, a major car repair that you absolutely need to fix to get to work, a serious medical issue with high deductibles. It is absolutely not for grabbing a deal on a new TV or booking a spontaneous trip or even for that house down payment. Its sole purpose is immediate liquidity to handle major risks without derailing everything else.
Got it. It's the break glass in case of emergency fund. And what's the target amount? Because saying enough can feel really vague.
The guide gives a pretty specific target range. 3 to 6 months worth of essential living expenses. Not your total income, but just the bare minimum you need to cover your needs: rent, food, utilities, basic transport, minimum debt payments. That range, 3 to 6 months, exists because people's situations and risk tolerance differ. If you have a super stable job, maybe a government position, perhaps 3 months feels adequate. But if you're freelance or a small business owner or the only person earning income in your household, 6 months, or maybe even a bit more, offers much, much better protection and peace of mind. The core idea is, if your income disappeared tomorrow, could you keep the lights on and roof over your head for 90 to 180 days while you figure things out, without having to sell investments at a bad time or rack up high-interest credit card debt? That's the goal.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. Secure the foundation first. That actually moves us quite smoothly into phase 2 then. We've built the basic defenses, the emergency fund is maybe started or funded. Now we can shift from just managing what we have to actively trying to make that money grow. Investing in growth mechanics. Let's start with something absolutely fundamental that people still sometimes mix up: the difference between saving and investing.
Yeah, it's a crucial distinction because they serve totally different functions. Saving is primarily about preservation and accessibility, keeping your money safe, liquid, easily reachable, like that emergency fund we just talked about. The returns on savings are typically low, maybe just keeping pace with inflation if you're lucky, but the risk is virtually zero. Investing, on the other hand, is actively using your money with the expectation of earning more money over time. You're buying assets, stocks, bonds, real estate, whatever, that you hope will increase in value or generate income. The goal here is growth, and achieving that growth almost always involves taking on some level of calculated risk. You could lose money.
Right. Saving is safety, investing is growth with risk. We understand saving for that security blanket, but why is investing not just like a thing for rich people?
Yeah.
Why is it actually crucial for pretty much everyone's long-term financial success, according to this framework?
The simple answer: inflation. Investing really has two main goals. First, yes, to grow your wealth over time. But second, and just as important, is to ensure your money's purchasing power doesn't get eroded by inflation. Think about it. If inflation is running at, say, 3% per year, and your savings account is only giving you 1% interest, you're actually losing 2% of your money's value every single year in terms of what it can buy. Investing is generally required to outpace inflation significantly over the long run. It's what makes sure that the financial goals you set today, like buying a house in 10 years or having enough to retire comfortably in 30, are still achievable down the road, because you can bet the cost of everything will be higher then.
Okay, beating inflation is key. This brings us to the real engine behind that growth potential. The concept that, for many people, is the biggest aha moment in personal finance: compound interest. It's called the eighth wonder of the world, financial magic. Walk us through how compound interest actually works. What's the magic?
It feels like magic, but it's just math. Compound interest is simply earning returns, or interest not just on your initial investment, your principal, but also on the interest or returns that have already been earned and reinvested. So imagine you invest $1,000 and it earns, say, $50 in interest the first year. The next year, you're not just earning interest on the original $1,000 anymore, you're earning it on a 1050s. It's interest earning interest, and then that interest earns more interest.
And the power just ramps up over time, right? You often hear the snowball analogy for this.
Exactly. The snowball analogy is perfect. Picture a small snowball at the very top of a long, snowy hill. When you give it that first little push, it's tiny. It picks up snow pretty slowly at first, but as it rolls downhill, it gets bigger and bigger. Its surface area increases. Soon, for every single foot it rolls, it's gathering way more snow than it did back at the start. It accelerates. Your money, when invested and left to compound, behaves in much the same way. Those first few years of growth might seem kind of modest. But once you hit maybe the 15-20 year mark, the accumulated interest itself starts generating more returns, sometimes even faster than the new money you're adding. Time is the absolute biggest multiplier here.
Wow. So time is the secret sauce, which means logically planning for something like retirement early, even if you can only put away small amounts, is exponentially better than waiting until you're older and trying to catch up with bigger contributions.
Absolutely, 100%. A dollar invested when you're 25 has so much more time to roll down that hill and gather snow than a dollar invested when you're 45. It's just vastly more powerful because of those extra decades of compounding.
Okay, so understanding compounding really motivates you to start early. Once you're ready to invest, you need to understand the options. The investment spectrum, as you called it. It's not all the same level of risk, right? On the safer end of that spectrum, what are the main investment types highlighted in our sources?
Right. Safer generally means lower volatility, more predictable, though usually lower returns compared to riskier assets. Common options here include things like fixed deposits or CDs, government bonds, some types of corporate bonds, certain kinds of diversified mutual funds, and really importantly for most people starting out, index funds.
Index funds seem to come up constantly as a cornerstone for safe, long-term investing, especially for beginners. Why is that? What makes them relatively safe?
Okay, so an index fund, maybe one that tracks a broad market index like the S&P 500 in the US, essentially buys you a tiny little piece of hundreds, sometimes thousands of different companies all at once. It gives you instant, broad diversification. So if one or two companies within that index have a really bad year, it barely makes a dent in your overall investment because they're just a tiny fraction of the whole fund. It removes the need for you to try and pick winning stocks yourself, which is incredibly hard. And historically, over long periods, these broad market index funds tend to deliver returns that reflect the overall market's growth. It's considered safer because you're essentially betting on the long-term health and growth of the entire economy rather than pinning your hopes on the success of just one or two individual companies.
Okay, diversification through index funds is a key safety mechanism. Now let's flip to the other end of the spectrum, the riskier options. These are the ones that tend to grab headlines, promising potentially huge returns, but they definitely demand more research and a stronger stomach for volatility, right?
Absolutely. The riskier end includes things like actively trading individual stocks, trying to time the market, or pick the next big winner investing in cryptocurrencies, or putting money directly into private startups or venture capital. These absolutely offer the potential for much higher, faster returns, yes, but they come with significant volatility, meaning big price swings up and down, and the very real possibility of losing a substantial amount of your initial investment, sometimes very quickly. The key takeaway here for listeners is really crucial. Any money you allocate to these high-risk assets should only ever be money you are genuinely prepared to lose entirely, and it should always, always be preceded by deep research and understanding of what you're buying. Never ever invest in these things just based on hype or FOMO, fear of missing out.
Okay, sound advice. Risk needs understanding and should be money you can afford to lose. Let's transition now into phase 3, mitigating risk and planning for the long term. For a lot of people, maybe the biggest risk to their financial growth isn't necessarily a bad investment choice, but existing debt, especially high-interest debt. What are the actionable steps the framework suggests for getting a handle on debt and maybe starting to eliminate it?
Yeah, debt, especially the high interest, kind of like credit cards or payday loans, is like a financial anchor. The framework stresses taking immediate action. Rule number 1, always pay more than the minimum payment due on any credit card or high interest loan. Those minimum payments are calculated to keep you in debt for the longest possible time, maximizing the lender's profit. Pay more. Anything more helps. Rule number 2 is preventative. Stop digging the hole deeper. Avoid taking on new high-interest debt for things that aren't absolutely essential. Using debt for consumption is just setting yourself back. High-interest debt actively works against the power of compounding we just talked about.
Right, stop the bleeding first, then attack the existing debt. We often hear about two main strategies for aggressively paying down debt: the snowball method and the avalanche method. Can you break those down? They approach it differently.
They do, and it's really a choice between psychology and pure math. The snowball method is all about momentum and motivation. You list all your debts, ignoring the interest rates for a moment. Just list them from the smallest balance owed to the largest balance owed. You focus all your extra payments on knocking out that smallest debt first, while just making minimum payments on all the others. Once that smallest debt is gone, boom, you get a quick win, a psychological boost. Then you take the entire amount you were paying on that now gone debt, minimum plus extra, and snowball it onto the next smallest debt. It builds momentum.
Okay, snowball for the quick wins feels good. What about the avalanche method? Sounds more intense.
The avalanche method is the financially optimal approach, mathematically speaking. It ignores the balance size and focuses purely on the interest rates. You list your debts from the highest interest rate down to the lowest. You throw all your extra money at the debt with that killer high interest rate first, while paying minimums on everything else. Once the highest interest debt is wiped out, you take all the money you were paying towards it and attack the debt with the next highest interest rate. Mathematically, this method saves you the most money in the long run because you're eliminating the most expensive debt first. High interest rates are what really cost you.
So if listeners thinking, okay, snowball or avalanche, which one is right for me? What's the advice?
It really depends on your personality and what keeps you motivated. If you're someone who gets discouraged easily and needs those small, frequent victories to stay on track with a plan, the snowball method might actually be better for you, even if it technically costs a little more in interest over the total repayment time, because finishing is better than giving up. But if you're very disciplined, maybe more motivated by numbers and efficiency, and you just want to minimize the total amount of interest you pay over your lifetime, then the avalanche method is definitely the smarter, more financially efficient choice. Either way, the critical warning is still there. Make sure any new debt you take on is for things that are arguably investments in your future, like maybe education or a reasonably priced home, not for stuff that depreciates or just gets consumed.
Good distinction. All right, moving on from actively fighting debt, let's talk about something related, but more about future opportunity. The power of credit. We hear credit score thrown around all the time. What does that number actually represent, and why is it so important?
Your credit score is basically your financial reputation boiled down to a 3-digit number. It's designed to signal to lenders how trustworthy you appear to be when it comes to borrowing and repaying money. And that trustworthiness, that reputation, translates directly into real-world financial opportunities. A higher score generally means, yes, it's easier to get approved for loans or credit cards, but even more importantly, a good score usually gets you access to the lowest available interest rates on major loans. Think mortgages, car loans, and that's where it really hits your wallet.
Yeah, let's underscore that tangible impact. Lower interest rates mean lower payments, right? Over the life of a big loan, that's serious money.
Oh, absolutely massive amounts. On something like a 30-year mortgage for a house, the difference between getting a good interest rate because you have a great credit score versus a mediocre or poor rate because your score is low, that difference of maybe just 1 or 2 percentage points can literally save you tens of thousands, sometimes even hundreds of thousands of dollars in interest payments over the decades. It's a huge financial leverage point. It basically dictates how much it costs you to borrow money for potentially the rest of your life.
Okay, point taken. The score matters a lot. So improving it or maintaining a good one is essential. What are the core habits? The framework mentioned 4 consistent actions.
Yeah, it boils down to 4 key habits, mostly centered around consistency and restraint. First, and most important, pay all your bills on time, every single time. Your payment history is the single biggest factor determining your score. Late payments hurt a lot. Second, keep your credit card balances low relative to your credit limits. This is called your credit utilization ratio. Lenders generally like to see you using less than 30% of your available credit on each card and overall. High balances signal risk and pull your score down quickly. Third, check your credit report regularly. You can usually get free copies annually. Look for any errors or accounts you don't recognize. Mistakes happen, and you need to dispute them immediately because they could be unfairly hurting your score. And fourth, be mindful about applying for lots of new credit all at once. Each application can trigger a hard inquiry on your report, and too many of those in a short period can make lenders nervous, suggesting you might be desperate for credit. So apply strategically, only when needed.
Pay on time, keep balances low, check for errors, don't apply wildly. Got it. Now, let's shift gears again, this time to the really long view. Retirement and the idea of financial independence. We touched on compounding earlier in phase 2. Let's just quickly reiterate why that connects so powerfully to planning for retirement early.
The connection is simply time. It goes back to that snowball analogy. If you wait until you're, say, 45 or 50 to get serious about saving for retirement, you have permanently missed out on 20 or 25 years of your money's most powerful growth phase, that early compounding period. That lost time is arguably the single most expensive mistake anyone can make in personal finance. Planning early, even if you're starting with just small, consistent contributions in your 20s or 30s, maximizes the runway for that exponential growth to happen.
Okay, start early, harness time. And what are the typical tools or accounts people should be looking at to actually do that retirement saving effectively? These probably vary a bit by country, but what are the general mechanisms?
Yeah, the specifics vary, but the concept is usually the same. Using dedicated, often tax-advantaged accounts designed specifically for long-term retirement saving. These might be things like employer-sponsored pension plans or provident funds. In the U.S., common examples are 401ks offered by employers or individual retirement arrangements, IRAs, that you set up yourself. A key benefit of things like a traditional 401k or IRA is that your contributions might be made pre-tax, which lowers your taxable income now. Plus, many employers offer a match on 401k contributions. They put in money alongside yours. That's literally free money towards your retirement. It's crucial to take advantage of any match you're offered. Using these dedicated tax advantage accounts is almost always the most optimized way to save for retirement over the long haul.
Free money is always good. All right, so all these steps, budgeting, saving, investing wisely, managing debt, planning for retirement, they're all building towards what sounds like the ultimate goal in personal finance, financial independence, or FI. How does the framework define that?
Financial independence, or FI, is really the summit. It's reaching the point where your income generated from your assets, your investments, maybe rental properties, etc., is enough to cover all of your living expenses indefinitely without needing to work a traditional job for income. It's not necessarily about being rich in the sense of having flashy cars. It's about being free. It means you have the genuine choice about how you spend your time. Maybe you keep working because you love your job. Maybe you pursue a passion project full-time. Maybe you travel. Maybe you just relax. The point is, the need to trade your time for money to survive is gone. Your accumulated wealth handles your lifestyle. That's true financial freedom.
That sounds like a pretty amazing goal to aim for. Freedom.
Yeah.
Okay, we've covered the core mechanics, the growth engine, the long-term view. Now we're into phase 4, which feels like it ties everything together. Strategy, the tools you might use, and the underlying knowledge needed to keep this whole system working. Let's start with setting goals, because just saying, I want to save more or I want to be wealthy is way too vague to be useful, right?
Exactly. Vague goals lead to vague actions, which usually means no action at all. That's where using a framework like SMART goals becomes incredibly helpful. It forces you to make your financial objectives concrete, trackable, and actually achievable. It provides the structure needed to turn a wish into a real plan.
Okay, SMART goals. Let's break down that acronym. Maybe we can use saving for that down payment again as an example. SMART.
Right. Let's walk through it with the down payment goal. S is for specific. Instead of just save money, the goal is very specific. Save money for a house down payment. Clear target. M is for measurable. You need a number. How much? Save $5,000 for a down payment. Now you know the target amount. A is for achievable. This is the reality check. Given your current income, your budget, your expenses, is saving $5,000 actually possible within a reasonable time frame? This links directly back to your 50-30-20 budget we discussed. Can you free up the required monthly savings? R is for realistic or relevant. Does this goal make sense for you right now? Does it align with your other life goals? Is buying a house actually the right move or relevant to your current priorities? And T is for time-bound. Goals need deadlines to create urgency. I will save $5,000 for a down payment in the next 18 months. See how that structure? Save $5,000 for a down payment in 18 months turns a vague desire into a manageable project with a clear finish line.
Yeah, that's much clearer. But I think people might hear SMART and still get stuck on that A, achievable. How do you really check if a savings goal is achievable based on the framework?
The achievability check goes right back to your budget, specifically your income versus your fixed and variable expenses. Using our example, $5,000 in 18 months means you need to save about $278 per month, $5,018. The achievable check is literally looking at your detailed budget and asking, can I consistently find and cut $278 each month from my wants category, that 30% bucket, or from my other variable expenses without putting my needs, the 50%, at risk? If you look at your spending and the math just doesn't work, if you can't realistically free up $278 a month without hardship, then the goal, as stated, isn't achievable. You have to adjust either the dollar amount, $4,000 instead, or the timeline, 24 months instead. It forces an honest assessment.
Okay, so SMART goals provide the roadmap. But even with a good map, people can take wrong turns. We need to talk about the common mistakes, the pitfalls that often derail people's financial progress. What are the classics?
The framework highlights 5 big ones, and they're pretty common. The first 3 are often behavioral traps. Trap 1, overspending. That's consistently spending more than you earn, often driven by impulse or trying to keep up with others. The instant gratification thing. Trap 2, not saving or investing early enough. We talked about this with compounding. Delaying saving is incredibly costly due to lost time. Trap 3. Relying too heavily on high-interest credit cards. Using them for everyday spending you can't afford and carrying balances month after month just digs a deeper debt hole. These 3 really erode your ability to build wealth.
Okay, overspending, starting late, credit card debt, those seem pretty clear. But the last 2 you mentioned sound maybe even more damaging because they leave you vulnerable or flying blind.
Exactly. Trap 4 is ignoring insurance. Not having adequate health, life, disability, or property insurance leaves your entire financial structure incredibly vulnerable to unexpected disasters. One major event could wipe you out financially. And Trap 5, which might be the most fundamental, not tracking your expenses. If you aren't consistently monitoring where your money is actually going, you're essentially operating blind. You can't figure out why you're overspending or why your budget isn't working or where you could potentially save more if you don't have the data. Expense tracking is like the essential diagnostic tool for your financial health.
Let's pause on insurance for a sec. People often see it just as another bill, another expense, maybe something they can skimp on. Why is it so crucial to see it as a necessary shield instead?
Because insurance is fundamentally about risk transfer. You pay a relatively small, predictable premium to protect yourself against a potentially huge, unpredictable, financially devastating loss. Think about a major health crisis requiring hospitalization, or your house burning down, or a serious car accident where you're liable. Without insurance, the costs of these events could easily run into tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars. That could wipe out years, even decades of your savings. It could ruin your credit for years. It could force you into bankruptcy. Insurance acts as that financial shield, ensuring that one piece of terrible luck doesn't completely destroy your entire financial future. It lets you recover and rebuild much faster.
Okay, it's a non-negotiable safety net. Thankfully, managing all these pieces, the budgeting, tracking expenses, automating savings, watching investments, even keeping track of insurance, it feels like it's gotten easier with technology, right?
Yeah.
What kinds of tools should listeners be looking at?
Oh, technology is a massive ally in modern PFM. It's indispensable, really. You've got powerful budgeting apps, things like Mint, YNAB, you needed a budget, Personal Capital, lots of others, that can automatically pull in transactions from your bank accounts and credit cards. They categorize spending for you, making tracking almost effortless compared to manual spreadsheets. Online banking itself gives you real-time views of your balances. Specialized investment platforms make it easy to monitor your portfolio, research investments, and even set up automatic contributions to retirement accounts. Honestly, if you're still trying to manage everything with just paper envelopes or complex manual spreadsheets, you're probably making it harder than it needs to be and potentially missing things. Leveraging the right tech tools can simplify the whole process dramatically.
Makes sense. Use the tools available. So all of this, the strategies, the tools, avoiding the pitfalls, setting goals, it all seems to tie back to one fundamental overarching thing: financial literacy.
Exactly. Financial literacy is the bedrock. It's the ultimate takeaway because it's what empowers you. It simply means understanding how money works in our world, how to earn it effectively, how to save it efficiently, how to make it grow through investing, how to borrow smartly when needed, and how to spend it wisely in a way that aligns with your personal goals and values. It's not just about knowing the definition of index fund or 401k. It's understanding why these things matter, how they fit into your larger financial picture. This knowledge is what allows you to critically evaluate financial advice you receive, to spot scams or bad deals, and ultimately to make informed, independent decisions about your money throughout your entire life. It's the key to taking control.
Okay, let's try and bring this whole deep dive together then. We started with those 5 core pillars of PFM. We moved through the defensive steps like budgeting and the emergency fund, then we accelerated into the offense compounding, investing for growth, and finally layered on the risk mitigation like debt management and insurance, plus the strategy with smart goals and tools. So when you boil it all down, what does this entire PFM journey really mean for the listener practically?
What it means fundamentally is that effective personal finance management is actually less about restriction and penny pinching, and much more about maximizing your future options and opportunities. The source material really emphasizes this. The ultimate payoff for being diligent with your finances isn't just a bigger bank account. It's achieving genuine freedom, security, and, honestly, a profound sense of peace of mind. It's about making sure your money serves your life goals instead of you constantly feeling stressed, restricted, or overwhelmed by your money.
That's a great way to put it, money serving your goals. But looking at the whole picture, the emergency fund target, investing choices, getting the credit score right, saving 20%, it can still feel overwhelming. If someone listening right now feels a bit paralyzed thinking, where do I even begin? What is the single most important first step you'd recommend?
Start small, but be absolutely relentless about consistency. That's it. Maybe you can't hit that 20% savings target tomorrow. Fine. Can you hit 5%? Or even 1%? Pick a number you know you could achieve. Then, set up that automatic transfer for that amount right now, today. Make it happen the day you get paid. And alongside that, commit to honestly tracking all your expenses, maybe using one of those apps, for just the next 30 days. No judgment, just gather the data. You need to build the habit of saving something automatically and the habit of awareness around your spending first. Get those foundational habits locked in before you worry too much about optimizing investment returns or complex strategies. Consistency beats complexity, especially at the start.
Start small. Be consistent. Track everything.
Okay, and as we wrap up this deep dive, we always like to leave our listeners with a final thought, something to maybe mull over that builds on what we've discussed.
Okay, here's something to consider. Tying back to that incredible power of compound interest and how time is its most critical ingredient. Ask yourself this. How much potential financial freedom, how much future ease and security are you unknowingly sacrificing for your future self simply by delaying that first, small, consistent step towards saving or investing today? Every day you wait, you're giving up some of that compounding magic. The action you take now, even if it feels tiny, is probably the single greatest gift you can give to the person you'll be 10, 20, or 30 years down the road. Your future self will thank you.